Hello there. Gonna try something new on this channel. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while. People have asked me if I was ever gonna do more review style videos. And I've thought about it, but this is not gonna be a ordinary review style video. This is gonna be a series called Top 5. Very simple, really. Just gonna be me talking about some of my favorite films in each genre. And I thought, since my channel is called Voorhees87, I would of course start with horror. So I'm gonna start by mentioning some of my all-time favorite horror movies, and yeah, I hope you'll enjoy this video. It's really hard to make a list of just 5 great horror films. There's so many great films you could choose, but I can write up some honorable mentions in the description. So if you want to know which movies I love that didn't make the cut, check out the description for those. So coming in at number 5 is going to be High Tension. This is the French horror film from Alexandre Aja, who, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is just a phenomenal filmmaker. Just a brilliant director. This is a very divisive movie because it doesn't strictly follow a logical plotline. This movie isn't really logical by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very stylish, it's very tense, and it's very gruesome. It is one of those really tough to watch, splattery, gory slasher movies that some people are gonna love and some people are gonna hate, and it's right up my alley. I've always loved this. I think it's a fantastic film. I really love the fact that this movie has twists and turns, which some people are gonna love, some people are gonna hate. I understand, it's alright if you don't like it. But I just think it really builds to an interesting ending that is pretty rare for most slasher movies. It's got this very personal twist to it, which I think is very nice, and it just makes the film very unusual, well composed, well acted, and at the same time it's really gruesome, and as the movie, as the name implies, tense, a lot of tension. So if you haven't seen High Tension, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't like the movie, I think a lot of people will admit that it's a unique experience, something you're not likely to forget in the first place. High Tension, fantastic. Coming in at number 4, we have The Devil's Rejects from director Rob Zombie. I saw House of a Thousand Corpses and enjoyed that movie, but I didn't quite get it. Then I saw The Devil's Rejects and it kind of clicked in place for me in a weird way. This is the sort of purest Rob Zombie experience you can ever have. It's kind of a throwback 70s exploitation, sort of almost like a crazy road movie western with this demented family, but it's really unique and special, and I don't know, I love it. I love it to death. I think most people would agree that this is Rob Zombie's best film to date, because it's just so out there and insane. It's incredibly violent. It has a very personal kind of violence. It gets under your skin, which is hard to watch, but it really works for a good horror movie. And the thing I absolutely love about this movie is the fact that all the characters are sort of gray. In other words, the characters you're expecting to hate are the characters you sort of end up liking, and the characters you're expecting to like might be the characters you don't necessarily fall in love with. The sheriff in this movie is a pretty horrible man who will go to any lengths at all to get revenge, while the Firefly family, these crazy murderers, are sort of having fun, and you sort of find yourself being strangely, it's almost like being with friends in a weird way, despite the fact that they're committing these horrible, gruesome crimes. And that's a really tough thing to pull off, a tough balancing act, but I think Rob Zombie does that so well in this. This movie is sleazy, grimy, and dirty. It's not politically correct in any fashion. The language is just horrible, and yeah, it's just, he didn't pull any punches with this movie, and I really like it for that reason as well. So The Devil's Rejects, pretty much a flawless horror experience in my opinion. On the one hand, it's a throwback, but in one sense it's also pure Rob Zombie, and it feels very modern and grimy and tough to watch. So The Devil's Rejects, must watch for any horror fan. I love this movie. I think it's just a sort of gruesome masterpiece. Coming in at number 3 is Ginger Snaps. This is a Canadian horror film from the year 2000. This movie meant a lot to me during a very difficult time in my life, which was puberty. This movie pretty much helped me through those dark years in puberty where you're not really sure why you're hurting so much, why you're not fitting in with anyone, why things aren't working out, what are you going to do with your life, where's your life headed, what are you going to do for a career, all those things. That feeling of sort of being an outsider and not really knowing why or what to do about it is encapsulated perfectly in this movie. Some people have said that this is just a sort of girly movie, that it's all about girls going through puberty and it's all about menstruating and stuff like that. I disagree. I think this is totally relevant for anyone who's ever felt like an outsider. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, a teenager or adult. Anyone who has felt like a loner, an outsider, and can really relate to those sensibilities. Very, very well written. It's sort of it's got a dark comedic flavor to it as well. These actresses, Emily Perkins and Katharine Isabelle, are phenomenal. I was a really big fan of Emily Perkins. I actually ran a website about her about 12 years ago now, and it actually led to me getting her autograph, and I actually have a signed copy of the movie right behind me over here, which is just phenomenal. But anyway, Ginger Snaps is a fantastic werewolf movie, a great horror movie, but it's also got this social, wonderfully written characters. And I feel like anyone who's ever felt alone in their life, or like they didn't belong, or, like they're on that fringe of high school or life itself, can really, really watch, respect, and understand this movie. This is part of a trilogy. There are 3 Ginger Snaps movies, and they get really dark and sad. They might not be the most violent horror movies you can watch, but they are some of the darkest, like thematically. They go really, really dark, and they very rarely have happy endings, if at all, which is also something I really respect. They're not afraid to go all the way with these and say that, life doesn't always turn out the way you expect it to. And I think I needed to hear that at one point in my life. I needed to sort of understand that, I don't know, you don't have to be ashamed of being different. You can sort of make it through the pain and live in spite of it. And you can sort of make the most out of your own abilities and your own capabilities, and you're not alone in sadness and feeling alone in darkness and, dark thoughts and things like that. It's really, not to get too heavy, but honestly, that was really like, I took a lot away from this movie, be it consciously or subconsciously, and it really helped me when I was in a very dark place. So, highly recommend it. Ginger Snaps, really fantastic movie. It's funny, it's dark. You really feel a sense of connection between Ginger and Bridget, these 2 sisters, and I really recommend watching the entire trilogy because they're all really fantastic films. I would love if there was a trilogy Blu-ray set, especially if it was region-free, so anyone who's got the rights, if you're watching this video, please give us a trilogy Blu-ray set, region-free, please. Like, it's way overdue. I would just love that, so... Fantastic trilogy, check them out. Ginger Snaps, probably the best. Ginger Snaps 2 Unleashed, also very good. And there's also a prequel called Ginger Snaps Back, The Beginning. They all star these 2 amazing Canadian actresses, Emily Perkins and Katharine Isabelle, who've also gone on to do a lot of other horror projects, including Katharine Isabelle was in American Mary and other movies like that. And both of these actresses have been on Supernatural. So you might recognize them from that show. They've just been in a lot of cool Canadian productions. So anyway, that's Ginger Snaps. And number 2 is John Carpenter's The Thing. I don't know if anyone is particularly surprised about that. A fantastic horror film in every regard. I like this better than Alien, and I think Alien is fantastic, so that tells you a lot. I don't know what can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said, but it's a claustrophobic, highly atmospheric, really wonderfully acted, sort of suspense thriller, really. But it also has these gooey, fantastic practical effects there. And, I mean, mind-blowingly well made by Rob Bottin. Wonderfully scored by Ennio Morricone, and Kurt Russell is, in his prime. So what else do you want from a movie? I don't really know what else to say about this. It's just so tightly woven. The atmosphere is just, you can cut through the atmosphere with a razor blade. It's just well photographed, well acted, tense, magnificently horrific and gooey and gory, and yeah, it's pretty much a flawless movie. I mean, there's you can nitpick some details here and there, but there's very little you can say about The Thing. Obviously, John Carpenter is a fantastic director. Halloween is no different. That's also a horror masterpiece. But I wanted to give a shout out to The Thing because I feel like Halloween is sort of the go-to movie that a lot of people have probably seen and talked about already. I feel like The Thing, even though it's really well respected and loved, is probably not quite as talked about, at least maybe not in non-horror circles. I don't know. The Thing, it's pretty much perfect. It's a wonderful, delightful, frightening, tense, atmospheric horror movie, and I think a lot of people who don't like horror can sort of recognize that this is something really special. They might be turned off by some of the effects, but the performances and the writing and, cinematography and all that is just really incredibly well made. So The Thing really holds up to this day. And finally, my number one. It's probably not going to be a surprise because I've spoken about this so much on this channel, and it's going to be The Exorcist. The Exorcist is a movie that I've talked about a lot in other videos, so yeah, I'm not going to go too in depth here. But I just think it's a fantastic horror film and a fantastic film, period. I don't think we will ever see a better depiction of horror than The Exorcist. Like a smarter, more mature, intelligent depiction of horror than The Exorcist. It has so many layers to it. The characters are so well drawn. And to take something as big and horrific and repulsive as this story is, and to film it like this small, intimate sort of chamber drama almost. It's almost like a documentary of sorts. William Friedkin really knocked it out of the park with this film. I think it's like, the more I think about the movie, the more I like it. You know what I mean? The more I read the book, the more I like the story. It's just, I almost can't fathom that someone came up with this, because it's so incredibly brilliant. And it goes to really dark places, but it needs to. It's justified, you know what I mean? You can't always say that about horror movies. You can always say, like, I don't know, that was kind of gross for the sake of being gross. It was bloody for the sake of being bloody. It was tasteless. I feel like everything that happens in The Exorcist drives the story forward. It tells you something about the horror. It tells you something about the characters. And it's essentially this devil, this demon, trying to ridicule sort of the whole human race by taking the most innocent thing he or it can find, and that's this little girl who's 11, 12 years old. And yeah, it goes really deep, and William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin have both said that it's really about the mystery of faith. They saw it more as a theological thriller than a horror movie, because it's not really about the gross out horror, although it does get goopy. There's vomit and there's spinning heads and blood and stuff like that. But that's not really the point of the story. It's not really about just the shock level. It all happens for a reason, and the reasons are very deep. And they go very, very profoundly deep, and we have these characters questioning life itself, existence, faith, all of the big questions, essentially. But it's done in such a small way, in such an intimate way, and you have this battlefield for life and death, good and evil, right and wrong, old and young, and all these contrasts going on in this small little bedroom. It could be any house on your street, right down. You can look out of the window and you can imagine this happening to anyone in any household, essentially. And that makes the horror personal and intimate and really gruesome. So yeah, The Exorcist, just a masterpiece. So exceptionally well written, photographed, just a must-see film, and one that I think just gets better and better with age, because there have been a lot of cheap knockoffs, but you can never replicate the magic of this story. Like I said, the more I think about it, the more I enjoy it, and I don't think we will ever see a depiction of horror quite this clever and well executed ever again. I literally think it's that simple. We'll never see anything quite like this ever again. So that's why The Exorcist is my number one. Alright, hope you enjoyed this video. That was my pick for the top 5 horror movies in my collection. And if you like this, give me a thumbs up and I will come back soon and make a couple more with more genres like action and sci-fi, maybe some thrillers and stuff like that. I might not do comedy because I don't watch a lot of comedy movies, to be honest. But I might do animation if anyone's interested, because I love animation for sure. It's been fun and I hope you like this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have a nice weekend. See ya.